Merry met, virtual traveller, and welcome to Stories of the Sun, a limited episode podcast created as a companion to the book Stories of the Sun, published by the History Press and written by me, Dawn Nelson, an author and professional storyteller. The idea for this book began when I challenged myself to get up once a month over the year to watch the sunrise in order to reconnect with the sun and its stories. Throughout the 8 episodes, I will include some snippets of audio that I recorded especially for this podcast. This episode looks at the taming of the sun, autumn, gold and sundogs. Grab yourself a cuppa, find a comfy spot, and come with me now to my sit spot on the hill as we continue our sunrise. A little flock of seagulls just flown across from the pink to the blue. There's plenty of birds about this morning. All your usual suspects. They're arguing a bit this morning as well. They'll be getting ready to nest. It's a little firecrest. Not sure if you can hear that on the recording. There it is again. I love listening to the firecrest. I'm enjoying my coffee this morning. It's not quite as cold on the ground as I thought it would be. But still pretty nippy. It's a good job by War My Outdoor Storytellers friends, aka the thermals. Quite high above me now is what looks like skeins. Very clear V's. It could be geese, I can't see. But I've noticed the seagulls also fly in a similar way. Woodpecker started behind me in the wood. Mr. Crow. And Jenny Wren. For the Mexica people, the world as we know it was created over a series of ages. It was not until the 5th age that the sun was tamed and the world was stable. The Mexica people, or Aztecs as they are more commonly known, are often thought of as a very ancient civilization, and they were, but they were also more modern than our memories may allow us to remember. Their empire was established in the 12th century, but contact was not made with them until the Spanish conquistador Cortés invaded them in the 16th century. I think we can all agree he didn't knock politely. But what were the Spanish conquistadors after, other than land? Well, gold, of course, and the Mexica people had plenty of it, so much so that they referred to it as sun shit. Apologies if any little ears are listening, but there is a wonderful alliteration to be had in that phrase. If you are young and listening and wish to share this with your teachers, I would suggest calling it sun poo, or if you really want to be extremely eloquent, call it excrement of the sun. Okay, that's enough of that. I talk a little more about the Aztecs and the Spanish conquistadors in the August chapter of the book, so I won't spoil that for you. The taming of the sun that I mentioned in the introduction to this episode was recorded in the Aztecs' codices as being carried out by the gods, and it involved a rather farcical, cowardly dog-headed god named Xolotl. He eventually became the protector of the sun, and again you can find his story in the August chapter of the book. But for now, I'd like to talk about something the Mexica people brought to us that was not gold or sun. It's quite tangential, but it does sort of involve the gods and the sun. And yes, you've guessed it, it's chocolate. Chocolate is 4,000 years old, by which I mean it's been in the human diet for 4,000 years. There is no chance chocolate lasts in my cupboard for 4,000 years. It rarely lasts 4 hours. In fact, come on, let's be honest, 4 minutes. It is said that the Mayan people used cacao in their rituals as a drink, and perhaps even used it as medicine. Well, that's certainly how I use it. The Mexica people were using cocoa beans as currency in the 15th century, which I think again demonstrates how plentiful gold was. if cocoa beans became a primary currency. It is thought that it was Cortés that brought cocoa seeds to Spain, and from there it quickly became a sweet treat of the very wealthy and spread throughout Europe. A reminder of this history is in the Montezuma brand of chocolate, prevalent in the southeast of England, and it is extremely delicious if you ever get the chance to try it. Montezuma perhaps refers to the 9th emperor of the Mexica people's empire, who was named Moctezuma. You might be asking, Dawn, what has this got to do with the sun, smiting it, and indeed the autumn equinox, which, as we're on episode 5 of this limited episode podcast, is about where we should be in the cycle of the sun. Well, I don't think there's anything better than a cup of hot chocolate whilst you're sat beside the fire on an autumn evening. So let's get back to the dwindling rays of our autumn sunrise. Taming or smiting the sun is something that happens in a few stories that I found in my research for the book. The two that I have included are the Mexican story of Xolotl, as previously mentioned, and the Mongolian story of Erkimergen. In both these stories, there is more than one sun in existence, and in order to create balance, only one should remain, and it is up to the heroes of the story to ensure that. It is interesting to me that both these stories come from the Northern Hemisphere, one from the far west and one from the far east, if you're looking at it on a flat map. If it's a globe that you're looking at, then actually they're quite close together. I wondered what the sun might have looked like all those thousands of years ago to those nations, so I did a little bit more digging. There is a phenomenon that meteorologists call sundogs. This is when it looks like there is more than one sun in the sky. It's just one of several phenomenons caused by a refraction of the light through ice crystals, and there is some discussion about the name and where it came from. It is thought that perhaps the name sundog derives from the Danish and Norwegian word stolhund, both spelt slightly differently but sound around about the same, and that this word in turn refers to the wolf Skoll from the Norse mythology. Skoll is the wolf that chases Sol in her chariot holding the sun. It would make sense that in Mongolia, a country that has high altitudes, very cold nights and brief summers, that this phenomenon may occur with enough frequency to warrant a story about it, hence Erkimergen. But Mexico is hot, isn't it? Well, it is, yes. It is, definitely. But it too has places that are at very high altitude. The Mexica people lived in a valley between two ridges of extremely high mountains. It would be cold at the top of these mountains, and if you climbed one, this phenomenon may be visible on a sunny day, again resulting in a story, perhaps one of epic adventures and journeys this time. With that in mind, I shall leave you beside the fireplace with your cup of Mexica hot chocolate. And if you would like to delve a little more into the story of Erkimergen, well then you can visit the April chapter in the book, Stories of the Sun. And for Xolotl's story, you can take a look at the August chapter. For the autumn equinox, visit September's chapter for a sunset this time and some recipes for pickling and preserving the last fruits and vegetables of autumn. And for more about Sol and Skoll, well, take a look at December's chapter for the dark days. For the next episode, we will be dancing in the liminal space and taking a look at the animals that I encountered during my sunrises in that crepuscular moment between night and day. Thanks for joining me for this episode. As always, reviews are enormously helpful. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave me a review either on Apple iTunes or via my Facebook. Both are very welcome and really help these stories to travel out into the world and connect with new souls. Stories of the Sun is now available to buy in bookshops. And for more folklore and stories, you can subscribe to my Substack newsletter. Just hop over to the Substack site and search for Cerridwen's Cauldron, or use the link in the show notes. You can upgrade to paid for just £5 a month for an extra dose of wild storytelling to your inbox, which includes podcast extras for Stories from Lore, my other podcast, and Stories of the Sun. Signing up as a paid or free subscriber is much appreciated and helps to support the podcasts and my work with folklore and story. Podcast extras for Stories of the Sun include a full, uninterrupted version of the audio for the sunrise featured at the beginning of this podcast, behind the scenes, journaling activities, and extra stories. You can find me on Instagram as @dd_storyteller, on Facebook as DD Storyteller, and via Substack as Cerridwen's Cauldron. I hope to see you there, as I'd love to tell you another story. I'll see you next time. Toodle pip.